This conversation is sponsored by Mary Nazzal-Batayneh.
This is what I know. We're all connected to one another, the earth and all her inhabitants. We thrive on these connections, real ones that touch our soul, fill our heart and invigorate our mind. I have been so fortunate to experience this all my life, meeting extraordinary, ordinary folks who inspire and provoke. My name is Khadija Muhaisen. Welcome to Adventures of the Soul Conversations. My hope is that they will fill your cup as they have filled mine. My guest today saw herself in the faces of a group of boys playing soccer in the street in Clarkston, Georgia, in a chance encounter that would change the trajectory of her life, theirs, and hundreds of others soon after. She told me the only difference between her and those kids was her education. Through their shared love of soccer, Luma Mufleh and a group of 30 immigrant children from war-torn countries, including Syria, Afghanistan, Iraq, Bosnia, Burma, Somalia, and Sudan, put together the Fugees soccer team. This humble soccer team formed the nucleus of what would become a powerful organization, advocating for social justice. A school, a tutoring program, a summer camp, a college prep program, and a community and support network that is today helping the globe. I honestly see myself and my own girls in Luma. I see in her story hope, inspiration, and testament to the power of human connection and finding one's purpose. One soccer ball, one meal, and one piece of homework at a time. Luma Mufleh needs no introduction. She's the CEO and founding director of Fugees Family Inc., a non-profit organization that uses the power of soccer, education, and community to empower refugee children to integrate into the United States. She is a 2016 Top 10 CNN hero. She has been featured on CBS Sunday Morning, ESPN, The New York Times, Wall Street Journal, Sports Illustrated, Forbes, and so many others. Her TED Talk, entitled Don't Feel Sorry for Refugees, Believe in Them, has been featured as 2017's most influential talks, with over 1.5 million views. She's a Jordanian immigrant to the US of Syrian descent. She received her BA in anthropology from Smith College and recently completed the executive program in social entrepreneurship at the Stanford Graduate School of Business. Your TED Talk last year was awesome. And I have a feeling you hate public speaking, but I also have a feeling that public speaking is chasing you wherever you go. And I'm sorry that I'm putting you through it again now. In your TED Talk, you mentioned that you were showing your kids videos on grit. And all I could think of when you were saying this is these kids experience grit every single minute of their day. And yet you insist on sharing videos on grit with them. You know, this is something I imagine people like us, privileged, worried about our kids and how our kids will turn out. And yet you're showing refugee kids who have suffered so much and continue to suffer as they start a new life, videos on grit.
I think part of it is to remind them how strong they are and how resilient they are, and that you always have to fight, like regardless of how comfortable you are in your life, like there's always more work to be done. And sometimes it's more their parents than me. They'll be like, oh, you're getting spoiled. You're getting too American. You don't understand what we went through. And that's why, like, I feel it's important for them to understand their roots and the struggles and suffering of their people. Because sometimes it's really easy to forget or compartmentalize. And if you do that, then I think you become less empathetic and compassionate. And sometimes my players get frustrated with me. Like, they're like, why do you have to always remind us, that this is what our parents did for us? And I think it's important. Like, I think culturally it's important for us to honor our parents and our families. But it's also for them to realize that because they struggled and suffered, it makes them stronger. It doesn't make them weaker. It it makes them better people. Take something that people think maybe is a weakness for them, or poor little refugees, you suffered so much. And I'm like, you survived all this. Like, you have this strength that most people will never tap into. Yeah.
It's really mind-blowing to me, to have for these kids to have experienced so much, and the work you do with them. I know you've told your story 1,000 times, but I would really love it if you would share just maybe headlines. There's so much depth and so much profound suffering, inspiration, and joy in your many years. But if we can, and I feel like it kind of limits and just touches on the surface. When you say, I went to school and then I did this and then I did this, you just ignore the amount of years that it took you to get to where you are today. So if you can, if you can just compress everything in a couple of minutes.
Yeah, so I went to college in Massachusetts right after graduating from ACS in Amman. And after graduation, I didn't want to go back. I wanted to stay. And my parents were not happy with that, and they told me if I wanted to do that, I was on my own. And I don't know, I'm going to fast track through that part. That was probably one of the lowest points in my life. But I had really good friends in college that helped me get through that part. And then I think, like a lot of people after college, you don't know what you want to do. You don't have this purpose, and sometimes your life purpose comes from like parents or society. And for a long time, I think I was just trying to impress my family back home, or try to get validation from them that I could do this on my own. So I applied to law school. I started a business. I did some tech stuff, but I was never happy. And, in my mind, I was like, oh, maybe I'm just not happy because a part of me, my Jordanian part is not complete. Like I lost that. But I think a lot of it was because I as much as I love law and business, like that's not my passion. Like my passion is working with kids. And, it was by complete accident. I had left my cafe to run some errands, and there's a Middle Eastern grocery store about 10 minutes from where I live, where I can get like the real pita bread and hummus and, everything to make our food. And I missed my turn, and I ended up, driving through this little part of Atlanta, and I U-turned into this apartment complex, and I saw kids outside playing soccer. And it felt like I had been transported outside of the United States, and I felt I was in part of Amman where everybody's playing outside in the streets. And, maybe I was a little homesick, but it reminded me a lot of home and of growing up without coaches and parents yelling at you, with, just playing the game that I think we all love so much. And I grew up playing it in Amman with my cousins and brothers and neighbors, and it was always an escape for me.
Did you play it professionally? Sorry to interrupt you, because I was trying to figure out if you were you a serious soccer player?
I was somewhat serious. So I played in high school. I played on the team in high school. I played here in college. But then the commitment was too much. I think my entire high school career I was defined as an athlete. And then when I got to college, it started again. I was like, I don't want to just be an athlete. Like I want people to see me as something more than that. And I want to experience other things. So I did a year, and then I always did intramural or club soccer. But yeah.
But soccer was your thing, the love affair.
It's sports like soccer, basketball, like anything with a ball, like just let me escape with it. But like basketball, baseball, that was more organized in Amman. Soccer was the only one that was not organized.
I think soccer for girls was not, but now it's actually more organized than for boys.
Played in the league in Amman. I was like one of two girls that played. And then in high school, like we were lucky to be able to form teams, but there weren't other schools that had teams. So we had to play, in Cyprus and Athens and Egypt. And then when my sister, she's 11 years younger, she had a much better experience because it was
and it's even much better now. It's much better now.
And then now, like I see, we're going to the Women's World Cup, or we're trying to qualify, and it's awesome that it's gone that far.
Yeah. So you took a wrong turn, met those boys.
Yeah, and I had been coaching for about 5 years in Atlanta, upper middle class, predominantly white kids. And I don't know how much you know about sports in America. It's very organized. It's about paying to play. A lot of controlling helicopter parents. And I felt I had to...
And very much focused on winning. I think I heard you speak about your frustrations with that, about the obsession with winning and not necessarily focusing on including all the girls and, investing in the good players and not so great ones.
Yeah, and like the good players benefit from having bad players on the field. Like you learn how to help each other and teach each other and back each other up. And like I think the sport is a tool for getting groups of people together. But it also felt like, I wasn't having as much fun. And I think the timing was just all perfect. I got out of my car. I had a soccer ball. The boys wanted the ball, and I wanted to play. So we had our little exchange. And a couple of them were from Sudan. 3 were from Afghanistan. 1 was from Liberia. They were surprised that I was also foreign born, because to them I looked like an American. I spoke like an American until I started speaking Arabic. They'd never seen women and girls play. But it was the start of our first team.
And you also mentioned that I think one of the boys' mother was stunned because she saw you from the back, so she had no idea. She didn't think.
Yeah, because the boys kept going back and telling her they're Afghan. They're like, no, our coach is Muslim. It's a female, because she kept worrying, like, where are you going every afternoon? And so when she walked in, from the back, like my hair is short, I had shorts on. And she just started yelling and screaming and went to get her hijab to cover up. The boys are like on the floor laughing, and I was so confused as to what was happening. And she didn't believe until I said, Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah. And then she looks at me, she's like, oh, you're that kind of Muslim, like
that kind of Muslim.
Okay, yeah, I'm that kind.
Awesome. That's awesome. And then you put together a team. I understand. 30 kids?
30 kids. So they came out to try out. And, I think, like most people, I live in my little bubble. And for most of my time in America, I blocked out all the poverty and the issues that were there. And I was just shocked. I was just shocked that the level of poverty that could happen in the United States, in a country with so much. Like the kids that I started coaching, some of them didn't have food at home. They didn't have clothes. And I was just like, and it was 5 miles from where I lived. And I had seen it.
But Luma, what stunned me about your experience helping those kids is that it's not like you were extremely well off anyway, and you had filed for bankruptcy. Things were tough for you, and yet you found a way to help them out.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's like, I know the resources I had was like, I could play, I could coach them, I could teach, those were skill sets I had. And I remember taking one of my players home, and he was holding his stomach, and he's like, oh, I'm hungry. And I thought he was trying to get me to stop at McDonald's or Taco Bell. And I'm like, you're going to be home soon. There's food. And he's like, No, coach, it's that time of the month. And that meant the time the food stamps run out. And, in my, very privileged upbringing, I started judging. I was like, oh, his mom is spending the money on like wasteful things. He doesn't know how to manage a budget. And I went and bought groceries for him. And then, sat down with his mom and tried to make a budget. And she worked full time. And there was no place in this budget that I could cut costs because she wasn't getting paid enough. She was cleaning rooms at the Ritz-Carlton and could not feed her 3 children. And it stunned me. Like, I think refugees in America show everything that is good about the system and everything that is bad about it. But then I was like, I can't buy groceries every week. I can't buy it for every player. And so how do I give them the tools? How do I, if the mom needed an extra job, or can she share an apartment with another family, at least temporarily until they save money? And then understanding that the parents are the ones sacrificing, that it's the kids that needed the education that will get them out of that cycle.
So at first, I'm just walk me through your process, because I mentioned earlier before we started taping that, I was very, very emotional yesterday. I watched some videos of yours online, and I saw myself in you. I saw my daughters in you. And, but, I was in tears, but the good tears, because you did something. You pinpointed, you identified, first of all, you established a connection with these boys. And, that is beyond, I think, any government or any institution can do, this connection, this personal connection. And then you found out more about their needs. Food. Yeah. So that was one. Walk me through your thoughts, when you would go home at night after you coach the kids and maybe you bring them groceries. What was going through your mind in terms of how do I help? What do I do? Where do I start? Before you go to education, because this was how it started, right?
Yeah. I mean, for me, it's like, okay, I can definitely coach. I can start a team. I know how to do that. But if your team is hungry, they can't play. If a player on your team is worried that they're going to get kicked out of the apartment, they can't play.
Their stomach hurts. They're holding their stomach. Yeah.
And, like sometimes I would come home and be like, well, I'm not going to eat. I want to experience how much they're suffering. And that was just a horrible phase of we fast. I know how that feels not to have food all day.
Yeah, but you're thinking about food all day, and the privilege that you have, you're going to eat.
Yeah. And so trying to see what little things I could do, so like if we have a game, bringing sandwiches for the whole team, not just 1 or 2 kids that I know maybe are hungry. I was like, we're all the same. We're all in the same boat from week to week. I don't know what changes for every family. And then getting my friends involved, getting them to help out. But for us, it's like feeding them was just a Band-Aid solution. Like we can't, I didn't have the resource to feed my team.
It's not sustainable. You didn't even have money to buy them uniforms, did you?
No. I mean, we had T-shirts. We had white T-shirts, and we wrote our numbers on the back. But it's like, what can we do with the bare minimum?
But when you'd go home at night and you're in your bed, and there's a sense of, I'm assuming that there's a sense of fulfillment because there is joy, and because you've obviously found your purpose.
Yeah.
But then there's the frustration of thinking that this is so overwhelming.
Yeah.
I think this is where I sometimes this is where I am, and your story makes me feel like all these kids, my daughter in college and her friends about to graduate, they're going to watch your story, and I want you to speak to them.
Like, I think, we look at, like people like, oh, there's 65 million refugees, right?
Yes.
And this is the suffering. This is what's going on. And like, for me, it's like, I had 16 to 20 kids to worry about. That was a lot more manageable. It was like, these were the kids that were down the street from me that I could impact directly, and then start carving away a little bit at every problem. Like, I couldn't do everything. So let's form a connection. Let them trust me. Let them understand that they feel safe and welcome. Maybe in, because where they live, soccer was such a, that was the highlight of their day. If I could provide that every day and work in the back end to like, let's see, are there food pantries they could go to? Are there better jobs we can get their parents access to? Are there classes their parents need to go to so they can get better jobs? You know, so you start carving, you can't tackle the problem like all of it at once. It's like you start with one and then you learn more and then you tackle the second part. And then you learn more and you tackle the third. You know, because people are like, well, you know, your work is education. I was like, no, my work is social justice. Like, you know, we're trying to get refugees from a position of pity to a position of power and privilege.
Yes.
And that's the cycle we're trying to break.
And this is what I loved also looking at Fugees Inc. is that you offer guidance and consultancy for others working with refugees. This is incredible.
Well, it was like we had to take a step back because we were like, you know, I tell my students, you're so lucky to be in America. You're so lucky to be in the school. And then we have a responsibility to share what we know with everybody else. Because then if they can help their 30 or 100 kids and everyone helps, then that 65 million is less overwhelming.
Yeah.
Everybody looks at the number and says, well, we can't do anything, you know, or starts blaming refugees for all their problems. And, you know, that happens in America, it happens in Jordan, it happens everywhere. Then, you know, it's, yeah,
it seems like I've been reading now, you know, of course, racism now, science has proved that this is not even scientific, this whole idea of the superior race. So that's off the table. But now what is much worse is this cultural supremacy and the cultural discrimination that's going on. And I know now is probably, you're at the height of this, you know, with what is going on in the States with the wall. I mean, all over in Europe, and even here, you know, in Jordan and the Middle East, it's the same. So go on. Then you discover home education, like the issue with reading and literacy.
Yeah, like I mean, again, I was naive. I was like, we're in America, like we're in good schools.
Free education.
Free education. I thought every school in America was like ACS in Amman. You know, it was like this American school. They should all be like that. But they weren't at all. And, you know, some of my players had been in the country 3-4 years and could not read a word. And it shook me, I think, more than anything else, because I know the power of education. You know, my family valued it. My grandmother very much, and all the women and females in the family to get it. And I felt I was like 1 degree removed. Like if I didn't have an education, I would be in the same exact position that these families were in. Like if I couldn't speak English, if I didn't have a college degree, people would treat me the same exact way. And that was wrong. And so I was like, so if I have this, how can they have it?
And how overwhelming was that? I mean, forget the food. Now, okay, how do I teach these kids in grades 7 and 8 who cannot read, and yet they're in the system?
That one seemed simpler than the food for some reason. I don't know. Like, I think, you know, like, oh, we've been to school. I know what a school is. I'd never been a teacher. I'd taken some education classes. I don't know if it's because I had excellent teachers growing up that I was like, oh, this should be easy. Like, I don't remember having a horrible teacher in elementary, middle, or high school. Like, I just thought all teachers are good. It can't be that hard. And we started at the beginning, you know, so you start with the letters of the alphabet, the days of the week, it's like if I was to teach someone Arabic right now, you know, like someone who's 14, you don't start in middle school content. You start from the beginning. And, you know, when you have a group of kids that are all in the same place and you tell them, you're like, you can't read. Like, that's one of the first things I say to all my new students first day of school is like, you guys can't read. And everybody's like, I can't. I was like, you can't. I said, I have the test results. You can't read. I was like, now we have to work on getting you to 2nd or 3rd grade by the end of 1st year, and then work your way up.
And you work year round, all year?
All year, yeah. And that it's hard work.